Now, it's been 1 week since Election Day across America, yet the votes in the presidential race are still being tallied. You heard mention of the fact in headlines and punchlines that Hillary Clinton remains ahead in the popular vote, and this could be an election where the Electoral College and the victor there, Donald Trump, may not win the popular vote. For more on this occurrence, let's welcome in Fred Lucas, White House correspondent for the Daily Signal. Fred's also the author of the book Tainted by Suspicion: The Secret Deals and Electoral Chaos of Disputed Presidential Elections. And Fred joins us today from Newsmax, Washington. So Fred, before we get to a look back, we have to get your assessment of the here and now. Give us your take on what transpired last Tuesday.
Well, this will be the fifth time in American history that we've seen the electoral vote and the popular vote split. The first times, 4 times I wrote about in my book, Tainted by Suspicion, in which it was 1824, 1876, 1888, and of course 2000, which we all remember the hanging chads. The difference with this election and what makes it actually the most like 1888, and that's the one most people forget, is because this one will not be contested. The Electoral College vote was so lopsided, similar to when Harrison defeated Grover Cleveland in 1888, and that's why we won't have a dispute this year with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump.
Yeah, and it's interesting, there's no dispute afoot formally, but informally, Fred, you take a look at these professional protesters out in the street. In fact, up in Portland, Oregon, you may have seen the reports. Local media there saying more than half of those arrested in the riots didn't even vote in Oregon, either because they didn't turn in their ballot — you have to vote by mail in Oregon — or they weren't registered to vote. Do you expect the unrest to continue, and one bone of contention to be, but Hillary won the popular vote? Or does this fact about the electoral laxity, the non-voting status of these rioters, take away that argument in your mind?
Well, it almost doesn't matter, and not to be entirely dismissive about the public's will, but the Electoral College was designed for states to have a certain amount of sovereignty and for states to have power. That's what it's the United States. That's the Constitution was designed that way. And further, both campaigns would have campaigned differently had they been shooting for the popular vote. I mean, you would have had Donald Trump working hard to get out the vote in Texas, in large Texas cities. You would have had Hillary Clinton going into New York and Los Angeles. They didn't do that. They ignored these states because these were lopsided states and lopsided areas. So both candidates were playing the game for 270. That's what they shot for, and that's the way it's always been through every case. The protests remind me a little bit about one of the cases in the book, Tainted by Suspicion, is after the 1876 election dispute. You had Democrats marching in the streets saying Tilden or blood. They're not being quite that violent about Hillary, but there are some parallels between some of the discontent about how the result came out.
Well, with that in mind, looking ahead, of course, George Soros and his crowd at the Democracy Project continue their meeting in Washington. Will we see the left make a concerted move now to try to abolish the Electoral College and embrace the notion of a popular vote? Can you see that happening in the next 2 years or so, Fred?
I think they'll make an effort. What we've seen already is that there's been a movement called the National Popular Vote Movement, in which they've tried to get around doing a constitutional amendment and get a sort of an interstate compact to agree on this state will go with however the popular vote goes. I think there's probably a bit of a problem with that solution because a lot of states would vote one way and then have their state's electoral votes go another way. I think maybe the better, and maybe split the difference, would be to see more states do what Maine and Nebraska do.
It bears watching. Yeah, that split up and go by congressional district. Fred Lucas.
Right. Yeah.
The name of Fred's new book is Tainted by Suspicion. Fred, from Newsmax, Washington, we appreciate your time, and we hope a lot of folks will pick up your new book. Great to have you with us.